Wow, it's 2025 and somehow I'm back on Battlefront 2. To explain how much I actually like the core gameplay of this game would be really hard. The beta for Battlefront 2, which is just the core gameplay of Battlefront, was probably one of my favorite multiplayer experiences of all time. It not only had the, background of Battlefield games, which I really like, but it also had Star Wars lore, which, I like Star Wars stuff. So, it was really just a extremely good game. But the launch of the game is where I kind of just stopped playing and many others also stopped playing. The launch of this game actually needs to be studied because the amount of corporate greed and EA scum work in the beginning of this game's like lifespan was probably some of the worst I've ever seen from EA. EA started talking about some other stuff, so you never know what they're going to do with their games, but Battlefront 2 was the peak of EA corporate greed. Not only were core characters in the game locked behind paywalls, which were loot boxes, the somehow the servers were just complete ass when in the beta they were really good. But before I sit here and make a full 10-minute video talking about how much I hate EA and their corporate greed, I want to talk about the resurgence in 2025 because honestly, I never thought I would see this. I knew the game got better over time and less monetization and less loot box stuff, but because of how the game launched, I never thought people would come back to it. Honestly, I never thought I would come back to it. But with a combination of May the 4th and this game going on sale, plus the Andor, show coming out on Disney Plus, it's bringing a lot of people in the game, and it's hitting all-time records over on Steam. Now, Steam is only a fraction of the player base. I'm actually playing it over on console right now, as you can see on the gameplay, but it's still having a big resurgence on all platforms, which is cool to see. And I honestly would have never came back to it if this resurgence didn't happen because, I already own the game, so I wasn't going to buy it again. And I'm not watching Andor, so it's not really giving me that Star Wars itch. But seeing people come back to the game really made me come back to the game. And after coming back 6 years later, it's really just what the beta provided to me as gameplay. The core gameplay for Battlefront games is what I like the most about the games. Now, obviously, it has the Star Wars stuff to it, but for me, I really like Battlefield games, and this game is just Battlefield but with a Star Wars twist. And, I like Star Wars, a little bit. I'm not the biggest fan of all time of Star Wars, but I do like the whole series, so it's cool in that aspect. But you see people all over YouTube the past week making videos on the game that aren't the biggest Star Wars fans, and they're just playing it because the core gameplay of it is so good. Like the whole domination or supremacy is what it's called in Battlefront. And then you have heroes and villains, which is also a really cool game mode. It's just the core gameplay for Battlefront games, the newer ones, because I actually never played the older ones from the PS2 era. I'm only, a new gamer, even though I did have a PS2 back in the day. I just never actually played them. But the core gameplay for the newer games is really what sets it for me. I feel like that's what sets it for a lot of other people as well. But what's next for the Battlefront series? Because with this new resurgence of players in the game and everyone talking about Battlefront 2, people are starting to ask for a Battlefront 3. And honestly, I would really like that, especially for newer consoles and newer hardware on PC. But I'm really cautious about the idea because EA is just honestly one of the worst companies when it comes to multiplayer games. I really like what they did with Apex. It wasn't super monetized, it was kind of just a BR. But even then, they kind of did ruin it with all their new changes and that kind of stuff. So, when we talk about a new Battlefront game, I'm very cautious on the idea because of what EA is, one of the most money hungry companies of all time, even though a lot of their games don't need it because the core gameplay is so good that it sells the game alone. But, corporate greed, CEO that are hungry for money, all that stuff. So I'm really cautious about the idea of a new Battlefront game. But I would love to see it, honestly, because I think the core gameplay for Battlefront is really good. And I think their newer titles are looking better, even though they kind of did kill 2042. I think the new Battlefield game looks really good, and how they're talking to the community, and big people in the community asking for help and that kind of stuff. So I think if it did happen, it would most likely be a good thing. But at the same time, I'm cautious about the idea. But I want to know down in the comments, are you playing Battlefront 2? And were you there around the launch and the terrible money hungry CEO stuff that happened with EA in the game? And are you hyped about a Battlefront 3 possibly? And what's your opinions on that? And until next time, peace.
She said I could have it. 2016, little bitch, I'm a savage. Johnny Depp's to a bitch, make all the baggage. Then I feel like a motherfucking bandit. RIP, just walk out perks in the cabinet. Sold on my